I personally would be expecting TBC to happen in around August. So if you've got from May till August for leveling up, I mean, that's a lot of WoW engagement and activity. More importantly, that's like 2 points of hype, right, for the game. And generally, if you're doing something like World of Warcraft, you'll want to spread out your big hype events so that you've got lots of them over time. It doesn't feel like there's dry spells. So I guess I have to wonder when, does this say anything for patch 9.1 at all? Or are we just going to have a situation where it's like patch 9.1 and classic pre-patch basically happen at the same time?
If I had to harbor a guess, I would say their current plan is 9.1 to be likely mid-late June. Maybe that's a little bit far away. It's a little far away,
Ooh.
but that would give them enough runtime for late August TBC to not impact the initial wave of 9.1 stuff. It might clip a little bit of playtime, so I imagine they actually might just overlap these instead. But I think they are very much in a situation where sometimes the game development cycles and release cycles will just, because they're two separate products, they will overlap and there's not much they can do about it. But I think there's a I mean, for pre-patch, I imagine that'll draw a decent amount of engagement, but it wouldn't destroy a 9.1 patch as much as the actual launch of TBC would.
Yeah.
So I think they're probably fine to do that. I don't know if there's much to take away overall date-wise here, but
Okay. It's just interesting to me. I'm trying to think about like just those times where WoW it's in vogue, it's talked about in places, and all that shit seems like pretty strong for getting WoW like sort of being talked about in the public space.
For sure.
So yeah, I mean, if it is going to be 18th of May, which is what this data mine string would sort of suggest, even though we should say that could just be placeholder, could just be bullshit.
Yeah,
we have no idea.
it says default clone date, not expected clone date or wanted clone date. It's just here's the date we have in this global string.
Yeah, so it's like if it was, then I mean it's kind of funny. Like you saying June for patch 9.1 does give me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, man, a situation where November is X-Pack launch and like mid-June is the next patch, and especially in the case where, when did Rise of Ashara come out? That was end of June, right?
Oh, I could not tell you.
So I don't want to.
Sure.
Let's just say I have somewhat heard maybe,
Yes.
wink, wink, that the initial plan was for that to be like May.
Yeah.
It obviously wasn't May. And we obviously know why. It was because, Battle for Azeroth kind of fell over and they had to do a whole bunch of fixing. But that was a long ass time. And there was, 8.1.5, there was 8.1. What if we had a similar timeline, but without patch 8.1 and patch 8.1.5? Both patches that added in substantial content. Not super substantial, but 8.1.5 did add in, was it Brawlers Guild and the whole Xalatath quest line that, of course, led up to Crucible of Storms. It's just, I mean, you saying that, it does spook me out a little bit. And also, what you're saying is not completely insane because we are, it's the 12th of March. We're in mid-March right now. And if a PTR takes 2.5 months, that's typically what they do take. I mean, for a major patch, right? Then we're looking at 2.5 months after March. That's either late May or June. And that's in a situation where you've got this, perhaps, just this pretty large gap of time, but unlike similar-ish gaps of time in the past, there hasn't been that tide over content. There hasn't been like the Suramar or 7.1, the invasions coming in for 8.1. So, yeah, a bit odd. I think it just does speak to us for WoW right now, being in a situation where they're obviously behind. And they're obviously behind, but I would say for reasons that we can't really begrudge them, because everyone in the industry is behind.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, if you're a World of Warcraft mono gamer, you may not realize it, because, the only thing you're paying attention to is WoW. Of course, we run the other channel, right? The news channel. And, I mean, if your game was supposed to come out in 2021, almost certainly isn't.
Yeah.
The delays that have happened have been wild. Just that World of Warcraft is a game that can't be delayed because of its very nature. So I think that's probably why they did so much to get 9.0.5 out. I think they knew they needed that stopgap, and there was just no other way they could get 9.1 sort of in our hands on time. So, not to blame them, it's just a shit situation that's happened to the world.
Yeah, it's terrible. At least they're not under fire for what is it? I think it was Santa Monica Studio were being. It was only a little bit of ire. It wasn't too bad, but people were starting to go, "Why did you announce God of War 2 for 2021? There was no way that was going to happen." And it was like it kind of conspiratorial, but it was a case where everyone, even like the general gaming community, knows that COVID knocked so many things back that they're looking at release dates and going, nah, even we know that's not right. Like,
yeah, but if you want to sell a bunch of PS5s, you definitely want your audience thinking the next year there's going to... I'm not subscribing to that theory, but you could say that.
Yeah, for this, it's a case where I'm happier for it to take as long as they need. It's kind of the short-term loss for a long-term gain. At least I feel that way. Because if 9.1 came out at the end of May and it launched with a whole host of bugs, some like numbers weren't tuning correctly. It's a case where if they do their like second wave of Stygia stuff, or whatever they're gonna call, I don't know if did they say they call it Stygia or just
the new Venari currency, yeah.
Whatever the new thing is for Venari and Korthia, if that's like balanced off or suffers from any of the same problems that like I felt that Anima has for the balance of numbers, I will be significantly more upset than waiting another week or 2 or 3 weeks for a patch.
It's like a large part of our personal issues with the game is like we enjoy the raid stuff, but we feel like, you know, that content that we would do in between raids during the Legion expansion, so like the class order hall stuff, the collection stuff, we don't like Renown. Neither of us like it. You know, basically for me, what should feel like a battle pass that you earn instead feels like a dressed up time gate. And I think that's meant it hasn't really achieved what I think it should have achieved in the player experience front. So it's like, we haven't felt great about the pacing of that. Neither of us feel good about the pacing of Anima. We both think that Stygia is completely stupid and broken. We both think that Torghast has incredible potential, but it's just like the Lego set was put together wrong, so it doesn't work. It's less... Basically, so much we think, because we've had so many conversations about this between each other. We basically think that Shadowlands has got all these great parts, but it was put together in a big rush. Such Shadowlands is, I would say, so much less than the sum of its parts, in a way that became extremely obvious once initial progression had been completed.
Yes.
You know, once your renown slowed down, and your anima gains were just kind of what they were, and your initial fun gearing via stuff like the unranked PvP gearing system, once that stuff was over, it just sort of fell to pieces a bit. And so much of that is just the assembly stage.
Yes.
And that's the sort of thing where, I can't say too much about things, but, you know, in some of the conversations that we are having regarding what the game studio is doing over here, when we're doing dates, we are trying to ensure that we have a big runway for the bit that just involves playing our game again and again and again and again and again, and working out what are the little bits that make this not feel like the sum of its parts. And it just feels like by the time they had built the Lego bricks that would become the Shadowlands Lego set, they had 2 days to put it together. And if you were following the Shadowlands beta, that's basically, it's pretty obvious that's what happened. So yeah, to your point, it's like you can have all these great individual components like Torghast, and then you can have them come out too quick and not be ready. That can't happen to patch 9.1. So I am with you. I am absolutely even if 9.1 is a month later, and that month is not at all spent on content, and it's just spent on ensuring the implementation is bug-free and rock solid and all that stuff, that's 100% what the game needs.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a little bit of a glimpse into my head, and this is why I constantly think that Shadowlands is so much more than it ended up being put together. I keep thinking about the amount of time I spent in the Maw that I actually kind of enjoyed. And that was basically me going around and killing rares, and I wasn't super enjoying the experience of it all, but I was looking at handy notes and I was like, man, all of this stuff is cool. Why am I running around this barren wasteland doing it because an add-on pointed it out to me? If they had a framework for actually exploring all of that, kind of like they kind of suffered a little bit of that in Mechagon, but they did have a little bit more actual guidance there. Like if the Maw had more guidance as to where the rares are, who they were, what was going on with them, even just like pop-up quests when you go by that have decent text.
Yeah.
If there was a framework for doing that, instead of it being systemized, do this until you get the pet content. If it had been framed correctly, even with just a little bit of work, all of that content would have come together to mean so much more than it does individually.
Yeah, it feels like all these devs spent so much time making these little dioramas, these little vignettes, these little, encounters and quest zones and things, and they put all their love and their stuff into those things. But it's like players very rarely get to experience that, I'd say, in the way that the developer actually crafted it, because they're just there to get some Stygia to grind up sockets. And by the way, they don't even want to be there anyway, because they're doing this not because they want to be in the Maw. So therefore it doesn't make sense. Which is a very different thing from, say, the Time the Isle, right? Where if you were an endgame character, you did not need to go to the Isle, unless you just wanted some of the, maybe some stuff for your alts or whatever, but you didn't really need to be there. Yet it was still a pretty damn successful thing. So, yeah, no, it's interesting stuff.